Is there a kind of elven decathlon type thing that they could do? Did they ever have?
Well, we know they had athletic events because Galadriel would dress up and actually compete with the guys.
It's actually bike across Beleriand.
Welcome to the Rings of Power podcast. We're the Lorehounds, your guides to Tolkien's world of Middle-earth. I'm David.
I'm John.
And I'm Marilyn. And this is our coverage for Prime Video's original series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2, Episode 6.
In this podcast, we're going to start off with our hot takes, and then we're going to get into our detailed scene-by-scene breakdown of the episode.
If you'd like to contact us, send emails to lotr@thelorehounds.com. If you want to join our Discord server or support the community by subscribing on either Supercast or Patreon, you can find all those links within the link tree in the show notes below.
If you're not into recurring subscriptions, you can also find a link to our Season Pass, where you can pay a one-time flat $10 to get ad-free episodes, our weekly bonus Lorecast episodes, and our one guide to rule them all. A endeavor that John has poured himself so much into that. John, are you okay? I think we're going to have to take administrative duties away from you for the foreseeable future.
Lightate, Eglerio, John.
Yeah, I'm going to walk outside and it's going to be a peaceful day, but actually my whole neighborhood's being invaded.
Oh.
Marilyn, what did you think of this episode?
Oh, well, I finally feel as though I'm in the presence of Amaya demonstrating his loathsome abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're really seeing Sauron in his Sauroniness and what he can do.
Gaslighter Supreme.
He's had to hold back so much.
He's in his villain era. Let's be honest.
He's definitely in the heart of his villainy. And it is a masterclass. Absolutely. I finally figured out why I love Shore's opening music so much. It actually sighs.
Huh.
And it sighs with the grief of the long defeat.
Huh.
I mean, I think that's a lot of what the Second Age is all about. That they're doing their best, but it's really pedal to the metal time. Oh, and there was a query from the previous episode from the ritual when the celebrant says Nasie.
Uh-huh.
And I found out that Nasie is Quenya for either Amen, if you like, or Let It Be So.
Cool.
So sort of
I like both of those.
Yeah, putting a period on.
Now, in our direct chats, you were telling me like, "Oh, hold on, this is an emotional one." I think you found this one quite poignant, or
oh golly, the number of times I was crying at things.
Oh yeah, so it was really hitting for you.
Yes. Okay. The very dramatic moments. I mean, that the human heart in conflict with itself.
Oh boy,
we haven't heard that in a while.
No, I know, but in this instance, it's the human conflict in conflict with human heart that it loves. Right? I mean, it's so much about parents, fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, and the more I think about it, after having done the Lorecast on the history of Númenor, this theme of course, for Tolkien, it was fathers and sons, but I will broaden it out to say parents and children.
Yeah.
Just is coming up all over the shop. So it's really interesting to see that. And, the vindication of the Valar, unfortunately, it's a precious, precious moment of affirmation. And I don't think it's going to last very long. I don't think Farazan is going to, take this sitting down. And of course, we already know what he reaches out for, and we already know what looks back at him from what he reached out for. But we'll talk more about that when we get there.
Yeah. He's definitely not giving up just yet. He's still like, how do I flip this? How do I spin this into my own thing?
John, thoughts? Oh, sorry, I was gonna get John's thoughts on the episode.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I did really like this episode. I thought it had a lot of really good, like, big moments. I think my one part that I didn't really care for that much was sort of the chaining the dwarves to the tree and the protest against the bulldozers trying to tear the forest down. That I was like a little cringy, but other than that, I think a really good episode. I really like the Númenor stuff. I really, that shot of them all on the rocks looking like just a bunch of Athenians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought that was beautiful. I think cinematically, and we don't get to see it in full 4K HDR or fancy stuff when we're doing screeners, but I'm going to watch that part at least. And probably the whole episode. I'm going to watch this episode on my OLED TV in 4K when it comes out fully, because I'm sure that scene looked amazing. And it was really very moving to see, especially the scenes between Muriel and Aarion and Elendil in the prison. I thought that was some of the best writing this show has done. It has so many great lines.
Agreed. Yeah. I actually saw on full screen a full episode with subtitles, etc., for the first time this weekend. And the increased richness and depth and everything was fantastic. I'm not sure what you mean, John, about dwarves chained to the rocks and everything. I'm sorry.
We'll get there.
I just mean like,
the
when
protest
you have
scene
like the
with
hippies,
Disa,
the hippies chaining themselves to trees so the bulldozers can't go down. I'm comparing that real life thing to the dwarves, to Disa and Doran.
Disa's, yes. Yeah. Another example of her singing. Okay. I'm with you.
Yep. But yeah, I think great episode. And like you said, Marilyn, we really get to see Sauron do his thing. In a way that feels new.
Pretty astonishing. What about you, David?
When I referenced you mentioning that, oh boy, this is a really emotional episode, so I was kind of prepared for that. And then I for whatever reason, I didn't respond as emotionally as I thought I was going to. On paper, when I watched it on my second round and I was doing my notes, on paper, this episode has got tons of great stuff. Yeah, there's a couple of, scenes, but overall, it should have been really hitting for me. And for whatever reason, and it's just a me thing, it just didn't click the same way that episode 5 last week clicked for me. So,
well, maybe I oversold it.
But then again, everything's moving along. I am really happy, and I don't want to go too much on a rant here about networks shutting down television shows before they even start to hit their stride, because at this point, I feel like our actors are finally inhabiting their characters and they're really growing into them. Mm-hmm. And I'm loving what I'm seeing across the board, and it feels like they've dialed it in, and it's right. It's hitting, they know what their characters, who they are, and how to operate them, so to speak. So,
well, and there must be a certain amount of security in knowing that you are bankrolled for 5 seasons.
So you can lean into it.
You can lean into it. You can be free of concern. You can just focus on doing what you want to do.
So the other thing that I haven't been focusing on, but I picked up a couple of times here, is the music cues and certain things. When the dwarves get mentioned, or Sauron does something, and like you'll hear the beginning of the ring, the One Ring cue, a part of it, or you'll hear the doom doom kind of dwarven stuff. And I was like, oh wait, that's been going on all this time. I've been paying attention to a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's there.
Yeah.
And it's really great because some people in film and TV criticism, one of the things that they talk about is music tells us what we should be feeling in a moment, how our emotions should be responding to what we're seeing on screen. And I was like, oh yeah, this show is doing that, and I haven't been paying attention to that. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to paying attention a little bit more to the music cues.
And listeners, if you don't believe us, try listening to the asteroid scene when Han is driving his way through an asteroid field without the music.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think you'll get it right away.
Or, don't look at a screen when there's a particular scene on, and then just listen to the audio.
Yeah.
All right, so before we get into our scene by scene, just a couple of front matter issues. I'm traveling this week, so I'm down in the big city. So if you hear some extra noises in the background, it's because I am in the heart of the city right now. And so it's a little hard to control for sirens and motorcycles and such. Quick shout out to all of our season pass and regular subscribers. Thank you all so very much for all of the new subscriptions. The season pass has been a big hit. So we just really appreciate you, and we're just so glad that you're here with us on this journey. Lorecast. Next up, Uruk. We've been talking about orcs and Uruks and all kinds of interesting things. We've been reading some interesting articles. Marilyn, you've got some cool research that and material that you've studied in the past that you're bringing forward. So
from some of the best Tolkien scholars ever.
I'm excited, Marilyn, because orcs are honestly some of my weakest points in the lore. Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited to learn from the master.
Well, and also the fact that Tolkien himself, you can see, I did a chronology, you can see how his ideas changed 2 times.
Maybe we could put that on the show guide, that chronology.
Sure.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. So our past lore casts were on Maiar, Tom Bombadil, and the politics of Númenor last week. We're not sure what we've got yet. We still have some choices that we could do. Balrogs has been something that we've talked about, but we'll see. Kind of depends on
lame.
Yeah.
Balrog is overdone.
Yeah. Listeners, write in and tell us what you'd like us to do, and maybe we can come up with something that way.
We kind of just thought that
I was just told covering the Lord of the Rings after the Silmarillion was lame, so I get one lame. You got to pass it forward.
Unfinished Tales. Is that what you? Anyway,
I got piled on. Nobody wants to hear me talk about Lord of the Rings.
Aww.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll do Unfinished Tales next. We'll talk about it.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. The show guide is doing well. John, you've been pouring your body and spirit into it. And
I have.
Ready.
And I just want to make a quick announcement.
Yeah.
We'll be traveling all day on Thursday, so the images for the show guide will be a day delayed this week.
Cool.
The images will appear on Friday. The synopses will still appear on Thursday.
And that's also a good point to note, because this week would be really logistically difficult for us to do feedback. So we're going to hold feedback to next week. So keep the feedback coming. Keep Nancy busy. Send in those emails to lotr@thelorehounds.com, or your voicemails. Use your phone app, or go to our website and use the form there, the little tool that's built in. Mm-hmm. But we're going to take all the feedback from this week, and we'll get it into next week, because both John and I are on the move. Just a quick mention again to clarify, we do have access to screeners. Thank you, Amazon. But we do not have show titles or subtitles. And I don't know, has anybody watched ahead? I have not, so we don't spoil ahead.
I haven't.
Okay.
No, I'm going to probably tomorrow at lunch. I'm probably going to watch episode 7, and then we're waiting to see when we get.
Yeah, we don't have access to 8 yet, so we'll see what they're going to do for that.
Yeah.
Cool. Otherwise, I don't think we have any errata from last episode. Nothing.
We've never been wrong about anything, actually.
Ever.
I don't remember ever.
And we have no outtakes.
About anything.
Yeah,
we have no outtakes.
I don't edit this podcast at all.
Raw recording. John, ready to walk us through a scene by scene?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool.
I'm excited. I wrote this 2 days ago, and I don't remember what I wrote, so here we go.
It'll be a nice surprise.
Arondir finds the orcs. Arondir finds a group of orcs and defeats them. Upon searching them, he finds a map to Eregion. Kind of a straightforward scene, but it leads us right into the rest of the episode.
A lot of running elves in this season. We had Elrond
I noticed that too. Part of their super healthy cross-country program.
Seriously.
I mean, but first I guess you have swimming with Galadriel, and now we have running.
Is there a kind of elven decathlon type thing that they could do? Did they ever have?
Well, we know they had athletic events, because Galadriel would dress up and actually compete with the guys.
It's actually bike across Beleriand. That's what they used to do in the first stage. Can't do that anymore.
I love it.
No, not easily. It would have to be an underwater bike.
Tour de France. How do you convert the Tour de France to Middle Earth?
Could be fun. I really thought that Arondir was getting some serious satisfaction from killing those orcs.
This is a really good topic.
That's why I brought it up.
For the Lorecast.
Part of why I brought it up.
Yeah, it's really something. And that one article that we were talking about, which we'll also share, this idea that orcs, just the enmity between orcs and dwarves and humans and elves, and how they just sort of have this, and we see it in Galadriel, this visceral response to you are a blight on the landscape and we have to wipe you off. And the orcs are like, okay, then, well, I guess we're going to have to try and wipe you off. And so it's like, outside of this whole thing of just the flat dimensionality of orcs, which we're going to talk about in the Lorecast. But
right. I have some things that speak to that specifically.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm exactly betting this, but I think that was something of a setup in this scene that Arondir may be the one to rescue a certain elf who has...
That's a good prediction.
...gotten themselves into rather a pickle with a certain aggressor.
So he did make his investigation roll to find the little hanky map, but he failed his perception check and he got ambushed by that. He rolled a natural 1 and got jumped by that other orc, but he beat that combat.
I was going to say that he didn't make any difference, did it?
Arondir has saving rolls for days.
There we go.
Right.
So was that Shagrat and Gorbag kind of a little bit Shagrat and Gorbag?
It was an interesting mirroring there, wasn't it? Yeah. And yet I think it's also important because up to this point, the only interaction we've seen between Adar and his children, they've all been his children and they followed him and they've trusted him and all the rest of it. Now we're starting to see a little bit of defection, which is interesting. And you wonder why that came along. Now, maybe these orcs were around, several thousand years ago when they watched, or maybe even helped turn Sauron into slime. But they haven't forgotten what he was like. And even this thought of a suggestion of a hint that he might be coming back is enough for them to say, hell no, I won't go.
Right.
Look, with these orcs, you got to put meat on the menu every now and then, or they're going to defect.
With the Shagrat and Gorbag, maybe we should just do a little lore check. If you could remind us, Marilyn, who those two were and what their conversation was.
Well, these are the two who were in Cirith Ungol, am I right? With one of them was the head of the tower guards and one was the head of the pass. So one was responsible to Sauron and the tower and Mordor, and the other was
that them? I thought they were two, because they were talking about. I thought their conversation was the one where they're like, "Oh well, gosh, back in the good old days when we could just get out of here and we don't have to hassle with all this."
So
that was their
two captains.
Okay.
One captain in the city with the Nazgul and one captain in the tower over. Yeah.
And they kind of talk about, boy, wouldn't it be nice? Oh, there's all this blah blah from the high command, and we just wouldn't mind just going back to living a more simple existence.
Even the big bosses don't know everything that's going on, and maybe you and I can slip away with some of the lads. And
that's it.
Set up on our own.
That's it.
That's going to actually be specifically referenced in our Lorecast.
Cool.
So those of you who are subscribers or have access to the Lorecast, stay tuned.
Very cool. All right, let's go to the next scene. Celebrimbor's mind falters. Celebrimbor struggles to find the proper alloy for the Rings of Men and lashes out at his smiths upon finding out that the dwarves have been late on their mithril delivery. After he forgets Mirdania's name and begins to question his memory, Sauron sends the smiths on break and reassures Celebrimbor. Annatar tells Celebrimbor his people demand an audience, but the elf recommits himself to the ring making. Celebrimbor sends Annatar to retrieve more mithril.
Charles Edwards was getting all Hamlet on us there with that opening sequence.
Yeah.
He was really getting intense about it and having this soliloquy about, what are you that you have this pride? It was very Shakespearean. It was
definitely
brilliant.
And of course he is a Shakespearean actor. I'm pretty sure that is the case. If he isn't, he ought to be. Let's put it that way. And can I just say right up front, I have so much sympathy with anyone who has memory burps because it's not fun. I'm just saying, it's not fun. I am not besieged by an evil Maya. My memory is not clouded by all this impossible stuff I'm trying to do, but it's still a thing when you try to remember somebody's name and you just can't remember it. And it just is like the first step of this cascade down the stairs of, oh my gosh, I'm falling apart.
And Celebrimbor, oh boy, sorry, I was stumbling on my words, is such a prideful person. And so to have that moment of frailty or faltering in that way is such a bruise to his self-image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he is very clearly the grandson of Feanor, and I'm so glad they brought that out of him, because season 1, I did not see that at all. He just seemed so like, oh yes, everything's fine, and I'm fantastic, and the Noldor are all living in bliss. And it's not until season 2 where he's like, I'll do great things, great but terrible things, and you really see that there's that great line in the last chapter of the Feanor's 11. I don't remember it is, and he was Fey, right? He was just Fey, and just stomping through the hills, just complete, like in almost like a flame of an existence. And you see that flame perhaps diminished, but still within Celebrimbor, and that's great.
Yeah, and of course, it's being very carefully fed by Annatar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still am left with the question of, what does Celebrimbor have that Annatar does not? And I don't think it has anything to do with credibility. I think there is some actual skill or knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that I kind of stumble on sometimes. But
I also want to shout out Amelia Kenworthy as Mirdania.
Yeah.
Because her reaction with that, in that whole interaction with him about, you're being a bit of a jerk, and this, and I can't, you can't remember my name and all that, and the subtlety of the reactions and her internal emotions playing out on her face was just so nuanced and so subtle. Some might even say demure, but it was
that meme's old now, dude.
It is now, right? I know. I feel kind of bad.
So 2 weeks ago. Quick. Absolutely, so 2 weeks ago. Come on.
I still like it though. Anyway,
moved on now, David. We're remixing campaign debates now.
Just put Grandpa to bed.
And I this may be in a subsequent scene, but I'm thinking of it right now. It was heartbreaking when she said, I guess I was too harsh with him about not remembering my name. And that's what you do.
Yeah.
With your elders, particularly if your grandparents or whatever. I mean, that seems to be that kind of age distinction between the two of them.
Yeah.
Maybe it was my fault, because how could it possibly be the fault of this person who I have practically worshipped?
But also, have you heard this conspiracy theory going around that's Celebrian?
I know.
I don't agree with it. I don't.
No,
think so
I don't
at all.
either. I think he just said you look like Galadriel because he wanted to puff her up.
Listeners, if you're not aware, Celebrian is the daughter of Galadriel and Celeborn, and we don't know if she is alive yet. Right? Is she alive yet? Is she not? Is that a forthcoming baby? We just don't know.
And we devoutly hope that she's already around, but we just haven't seen her yet.
But I just can't see Galadriel visiting the city where her daughter works and not acknowledging that. No.
The only possible way that could happen is if Celeborn somehow snuck her in there without Galadriel even knowing. But, there's so much subtext that would have to happen for that to take place.
I think it would be silly. It would be very like Luke Skywalker's lightsaber being found after falling down a pit. Being given to somebody who is just a rando. And, it would have to be like the sequel trilogy.
Did you guys notice Annatar's new threads? He was sporting a new outfit.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, David. I noticed he's dressing more and more like Celebrimbor.
And it marks this whole gaslighting taking over. What's the thing? The Dennis method, or what was
did you see somebody? I just checked Twitter. Somebody came up with a Sauron method meme and said it was inspired by us.
Oh, really?
Us.
Mm-hmm. Woohoo! Well,
hey,
when
job.
you have over 1 million downloads,
this is Aiden.
People know you.
Aiden Pocock Aiden Pakak. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry, but I'm going to read it out, and I'm going to thank you for this. This is very funny. I retweeted it. S, strategically isolate. A, all with power. U, usurp control. R, reprimand incessantly. O, obtain desired results. N, neglect, then leave for dead.
So we can see all of that happening right now. And then he's about to get left for dead real quick here.
Oh, that's funny. This Twitter name is Dunedain, like Dunedain.
Right.
That's funny. That's funny.
Very
That's good. That's
Very
good.
Points to your house.
You got to put a link to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Was it me, or did the forge look really desolate and empty? There was a scene when he was talking to him. There was a wide shot where we could see the way that the molten. It just seemed cleared out. It didn't seem lively like it had been before. And I think that's all part of that isolation thing, right? I think they're giving us the on-screen clues of, Annatar is looking more and more in command and bigger. He's less in the shadows, coming forward more. And then there's less and less people around Celebrimbor and in the forge. And it's all playing into this big plan.
I thought it looked tired.
Yeah.
He looked tired and it looked tired.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's right.
Cool.
Also, can I just say, I do miss Sauron's apron. It was very, I don't know. I just feel like I had watched that, like Sauron in the kitchen,
It was domestic.
It's like a Rachel Ray type show.
Sauron and Rachel Ray. Now there's a concept.
I like it. I like a Sauron cook, an Annatar in the kitchen show.
It's Annatar autumn, and we are going to be baking some fall treats today.
No, we're gonna super fire. We're gonna grill a lot.
Yeah, that was his backup career if he decided to go good with that older man that gave him the advice.
But first, somebody had to, explode Mount Doom before that was going to take place.
Right. Oh yeah, he bakes with the heat of Mount Doom. I like this.
Exactly.
I like this, Marilyn. You got the lore going for it. All right. Let's go to Annatar taking advantage.
It's such a surprise.
Yeah. Who would have thought? With Celebrimbor consumed with his work, Sauron tells the people of Eregion he has been placed in charge of the city's administration. That's a little bit of a stretch, don't you think?
Seriously.
The elves tell him that merchants have stopped arriving, and they show him the body of a scout who returned with a message carved into his chest. Annatar orders the scout buried and swears the elves to secrecy. Annatar then leads Myrdania to believe she and the other smiths have been relieved of their duties. He tells Myrdania that the carving said, "Where is he?" before looking out into the forest filled with orcs.
So the look on his face when he was looking out across the river, and I'm going to set aside the whole question of having several legions of an army so close and you don't know about it, but that's another topic and we'll get there later. But he looks out and I couldn't tell what was playing out on his face. There was some concern, but I think he ended with a little bit of a smile, like, I know how to work this into my plan now. I wasn't expecting this. This is a little uncomfortable, but I can see how this is going to work to my favor, and I know exactly what I'm going to do. That's the kind of interpretation I made for it, but I wasn't sure what other people were reading because it was so subtle.
Well, I think it's a timing issue. I think he did expect this eventually.
Okay.
I think he didn't expect it so fast because why else did he go as Halbrand to Adar, right? He did that to bait them there.
Fair. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's actually a very good point.
And I think his bait was rather more luring than he expected.
I think Galadriel's exactly right later where she's like, "Oh, you've delivered his army to him."
Right.
You gathered up all the orcs for him so he doesn't have to do that.
Unquestionably.
That is exactly how Sauron works and why this writing is so good, is that Sauron makes you think you're doing something for yourself while you're actually doing something for him. And that is a beautiful, beautiful piece of writing.
Yep.
Which Adar points out later and then uses the same technique.
Right.
But in a much more shorter time frame.
Yeah.
Right.
With Galadriel.
I think mostly his mind was absorbed with the thoughts of Adar. when he's looking out.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's worried so much about legions of works, but yeah, I think he's kind of doing his,
doing the math.
5-level chess.
What's that? Yeah, with the meme with the mathematical symbols drifting
all whirling around. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to point out about this scene in particular, which I want to give credit to Payne and McKay and to the writing staff. This is kind of something that indicates to me some maturity in how they're handling the show and the season. They could have left what was written on the chest of the guard or the patrolman or whatever a mystery for longer, but they set it up and they let it run just enough so at the end of the scene they give us an answer, right? We don't know if, it's Annatar, and we don't know if it's true, the real answer or not. But
no, I think that's true. Yeah. I think it's true.
I think it is too. But there's still always you gotta question it. But the fact that they set that up at the beginning of the scene and then they end the scene with the answer to the mystery, but the answer brings more dramatic tension to the entire situation. Yeah. So a question is answered, tension is resolved, but a new tension is introduced. And to do that so seamlessly and so quickly just feels to me like a maturation of the writing process for the show. And I just really appreciate it because I was like, oh, here we go. We're not going to find out. And it's going to be, maybe next episode that we'll figure out what the mystery is. Nope. They gave it to us right away. And they opened up a whole new situation. Yeah. Because what is Mirdania thinking now about? What is that? She's going like, what the F does that mean? Right.
Right.
And then we're like, and we're like, what does it mean? And it's like, oh, it's Adar. It's like, right. So we get a whole new loop of drama going on. So I really appreciate how they're starting to get smart with these little things like that.
I think we get a real clue to Sauron's priorities when Annatar says, until the 9 are done, nothing else matters. This has been his thing all along, and I think it's because of something else he said, which is he fears Númenor.
He fears what? Sorry?
Númenor.
Well, yeah, which he did say.
And for whatever reason, Annatar Sauron, cannot construct the 9 rings. Celebrimbor can. Therefore, all of his priority is isolate Celebrimbor, give him nothing to do but make those rings and successfully complete them. And so that's why he says to Mirdania, all we can do now is leave him in solitude. And can I trust you to, follow through on this?
Yeah.
Have either of you read or heard of the essay that got turned into like kind of a book? It's more like a pamphlet on bullshit by Harry Frankfurt.
You may have mentioned this like last year, John.
I didn't because I only learned about it like a month ago.
Well, then you didn't finish unless you were foresighted.
Future
using a
past
Palantir.
Yeah.
So there are many criticisms to have with this book. I think I heard about this on the podcast, If Books Could Kill, because they tear down every book that you can find. But they even say like there's something to this. This whole book's premise is there are people who tell the truth, there are people who tell lies, and then there are bullshitters. And it's not a lie. Because if you lie, you are still referencing the truth. You are still playing by the rules of what is true and untrue. When you bullshit, it's a total disregard for the truth. It is, I don't know if what I'm saying is true or not. I'm just saying anything that will serve me in this moment.
Huh.
And that to me is closer to what Sauron's doing here. Right? Like, it doesn't matter if that's true or not. He's just saying stuff to say stuff. And his name, Frankfurt. Frankfurt is, he's making an argument that, like, that's honestly a bigger threat to truth than lies are. Because lies, you can at least judge by the truth. But bullshit, you're like, do they actually, like, mean that or not? It's like, there's a weird intent behind it. And Sauron... What's interesting here is I think Sauron's most interesting when he tells something that at least has a basis in truth. And here that has a basis in truth. And I think that Sauron bends truth. He uses truth as a tool to withhold certain information and make it a lie by omission.
Yeah.
And manipulate people with just enough truth where it's credible. And I think that's super interesting.
And I think I don't want to. We don't want to. We try to veer away from current politics. But I think one of the important. But we do talk about social issues and history of things. And I think this is an important topic that you're bringing up, because I think for us in the community that we are part of, and why we've all coalesced around the shows and the books and the things that we like, is because it helps us to interpret the world and to think about our place in the world. And I think this idea of using power and control and truth and bullshit to manipulate and steer and shape is very relevant in this day and age. And I think that the more that we can sharpen those skills and listen and think and have conversations and contemplate, I think it's important in this day and age.
It was also incredibly important in Tolkien's own time.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. The politics of
World Wars 1 and
of
2.
the world wars between England.
He was
between
very
1 and 2
vocal about his distaste for the Nazi regime, right? And the Nazi regime is a great example of they just spouted bullshit. And I'm sorry to keep using that word, but that's the title of the essay. And that's literally the word he used. He's like, this is a.
Is there another word for bullshit?
Not a lie. No, there isn't.
Crap comes to mind.
No, this is.
It's not. It's not the same.
It's not as satisfying.
It's not the same. It's not the same. We're rated explicit.
I know.
We're going to
say what I want. All right. Shall we go to an awkward second date?
Indeed.
Adar muses with Galadriel about the way Sauron gets in one's head and uses the offer of power as a temptation. Galadriel knows that they both got what he promised them, her an army, Adar children. When Galadriel doubts Adar can defeat Sauron, he shows her the reforged crown of Morgoth. So we were wrong, Marilyn. That's an errata.
Yeah. That is. Well, it's not an errata.
It's not an errata.
It's completely outside the lore. Let's just say that right now.
Yeah. So the crown of Morgoth.
I did Leo pointing when that happened. Anyway, moving on.
And suggests that with the crown and the elven rings, they can destroy Sauron. He figured out that Halbrand is Sauron and asks her to decide the fate of Eregion, where he hides.
How is everyone liking Hazeldine's performance of Adar?
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, he's great.
Excellent.
He's playing it the same way, basically.
He's so hard to read. And yet very clear in what the way he's going and so forth. In thinking in this in advance, I knew that the two of them were going to get together. I knew there was going to be a dinner and there was going to be some kind of a proposition and so forth. And I couldn't see how it could end in anything other than the way it ended. I was looking forward to some really clever thing on the part of the showrunners. But I mean, this is absolutely in accordance with everything they've set up to this point. And what is heartbreaking is that Galadriel actually, for one moment, believed that he was offering some form of an alliance.
Right.
And, of course, all he wanted was as much information as she could give him, particularly the confirmation that, yes, this Halbrand person is actually Sauron and is in Eregion now.
Maybe the reason I didn't click with this episode in the same way as like last week is maybe because I'm in denial, because I did believe Adar. I thought he was offering. He got me. He actually got me.
Yeah, he got you, David. Yeah,
and I was like,
he played you.
He totally did. Which is beautiful because, as we said before, he's playing. Sauron's playing him. He's playing Galadriel. Everybody's playing everybody. It's Sauron's game, and he is.
Yep.
This is what he does.
Which I think Adar knows, but I think Adar also believes that he's the one with the army.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, he has the greatest likelihood of actually accomplishing what he wants. I'm sure David noticed, and John did too, that they used exactly the same Dutch angle camera technique.
Yes, yeah, it's right here. Notice the tilted camera. That's my note.
I'm so proud of myself. I got that name. I almost feel like, okay, I'm starting to think in terms of
starting to get this TV stuff,
television techniques, and not just plot and whatnot. But him saying that Sauron sees who you wish to be.
I have the same note.
And that's
his eye.
That's exactly how you get ensnared. And I guess I'll just have to squint about the whole Morgoth's crown being reforged into Sauron's thing, because, lore-wise, the crown was made into a collar, put around Morgoth's neck, and he was shoved into the void. So
yeah, but they don't even have the rights to that. So
I know they don't.
I'm fine with this. This
is sure. No, it's
trivia,
it's a nice,
right? Where is there a crown? Trivia.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I'll squint.
And it makes some nice continuity, and it gives something else, because he's saying. Now, I did find it curious that he learned about the Elven rings so quickly.
Yeah, and I was really upset that they're saying that the Elven rings can destroy Sauron, because that
with the crown and
function.
the rings together.
But it's not their function.
Right.
The Elven rings were to preserve and to heal and to gain knowledge.
Right.
They were not weapons of war. That's made very clear in Lord of the Rings.
Well, maybe Adar's thinking, what does he know? And does he know that those aren't that's not the purpose of the rings? Maybe he's just thinking about. I'm not even
clear how he knew about the rings in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. That was like really quick.
So maybe a bit of a plot hole there. And interesting that he says to her, the fate of that city now rests on your ability to put aside your pride. I suggest you do so, if you can. Pot to kettle much here, folks? I mean, really, who needs to set aside their pride more at this point? Because Adar is all up and I know Sauron, I know how to destroy him, I know what he's thinking, and so on and so on. And inside his head, he's thinking, ha ha ha, and I've got you here, and you're going to tell me everything I want to know, and then I can put you back in your cage, and that's it.
I just get the sense that Adar is not fully aware of the abilities of Maiar, or that Sauron is a Maia. Something's missing here where he does not really understand.
And you think he would after, living through all of the first stage, receiving the cup of blood red wine from the hands of Sauron, the beautiful servant, and then having it all fall apart on him.
And to be clear, I mean, the Valar did come from time to time in the first age. Because, at the end of the first stage, they are who fought off Morgoth and sent him into the void.
So not to be trifled with.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned the pride thing just now, Marilyn, it triggered the memory of what's to come later in this episode and all of the Númenorian stuff.
Yeah. Because
we have Pharazôn and his pride. We have Kemen and his pride. We have Arion and her pride. Elendil and his pride. And all the stuff that's going on in Númenor is all about pride. And yet over here with Galadriel and Adar, it's about pride as well.
The one exception I would say to that, David, is I don't ascribe pride to Elendil. And he says this very specifically.
No. But the issue is brought forward to him, and then he refutes it. But we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But it's a topic of conversation. No, I'm not saying that he's prideful.
Gotcha.
But it's put to him that he's being prideful.
Right.
So so along with the parenthood theme, there's this issue of pride, this theme of pride.
Yeah. And I think, Elrond is also stuck in that mode.
Yeah, right. It's true.
Though we don't see much of him this episode.
Do you want to call him a jackass again so you get more feedback?
No. Been there, done that. Moving on.
And Clark's acting when Adar is talking about how he manipulates you, and then she replies with that dull gray line. She really does a great job of embodying the feelings that Adar is saying. So he's saying this stuff and she's feeling it.
Yeah.
And you really see that back and forth between the two of them.
It's excellent. It's absolutely fine. By the by, I think in the previous episode, some people were speculating as to why Daddy Orc was menacing Galadriel when she was first released from her cage. And, somebody said, why is he about to give her a haircut? Well, I think he was about to cut her ear off. So I'll just put that delightful tidbit out there.
Well, she certainly is Mighty Morphid Galadriel.
Yes.
And we love her that way.
Yes.
Doing a great job. Let's go on to the trial of Elendil. Elendil is brought before the court of Pharazôn to account for his false crimes. The king offers to free him if he will repent for his crimes, which he does. But when the king demands a pledge of fealty, Elendil refuses, acknowledging Miriel as the true ruler of Númenor. Belzegar suggests they use a tradition of the faithful to decide Elendil's fate, and points to a sea monster in a book.
Pharazôn doesn't twirl a mustache; he twirls his eyebrows. Tristan Gravel is just eating the scenery, man.
Yeah,
his portrayal of Pharazôn is so good. Every time he's on screen, I'm just eating it up. I just want him to like belt out even more and just do all this,
But part of what makes it so powerful is that it is understated.
Exactly.
It's
like, give me more.
Fabulous lesson in acting there. And will someone please tell me who healed Kemen's shoulder, because I'd like to set up a series of appointments with them. I mean, when you think what Elendil did to his arm and his shoulder and his, all of that in the previous episode, I'm sorry, but I had a whole year's worth of therapy for a very minor shoulder tear.
He's like 12. I mean,
no, I'm sorry. He wasn't even wearing
They're Númenorians. They live long. They eat kale. They're very healthy.
That's why I say I want to set up an appointment with the Númenorian.
The nutritionist.
PT.
Look, youth heals faster than Nenya. We've learned that.
Not that fast. Holy cow.
Did you guys catch the cool drone shot as we come over the top of the meeting pot? Then we end looking down on top of the tree. That was the quote unquote drone. I mean, it's a CGI shot.
Right.
It feels drone-ish.
It was nice to have that brief reminder of the tree. I really hope that they're going to, in fact, enact that incredibly important scene for somebody's character, but they may not.
Very little tree this season.
They may not. We'll see.
Yeah, I think they will. That's a big scene. We can't.
All right, hold on. Keep your secrets.
There it is. I was waiting for
it. Hello.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up pride, David. I think that this scene really showcases that distinction, right? Because they say, "Will you account for your crimes?" And he's like, "Sure. You know what? I didn't do it, but sure, I will account for my false crimes."
Yeah.
But then they say, will you abandon those you've sworn oaths to, your whole way of life, your whole belief system? And he says, no. And I really think that that's a great show of his character here.
And I've always thought it was so silly of tyrants, let's use the word, to demand of people that they give up their beliefs. Well, what's that supposed to mean? Stop believing what I believe? I mean, it's not a switch you can flick on and off. How am I going to demonstrate this? Okay, so you mean I can't go to rituals and I can't do this, that, the other thing. I can still believe whatever the heck I want to. And you're not going to know unless my behavior shows it.
And wouldn't you almost be driven to be a little bit more, I'm going to believe even harder now because you told me that I can't believe.
Of course.
As opposed to have your beliefs, but if I see you on the street, I want to see you showing the proper respect, wearing the proper clothes, coming to the ceremonies at the proper times. So, give me your behavior.
Elizabeth I of England told her Catholic subjects, I don't want to pry into your souls. As long as you attend the state religion once a year, you can do whatever you want in your homes.
Interesting.
And it wasn't until the Pope declared her anathema and urged Catholics to kill their queen, and there started to be plots around assassinating her, that she had to get a little more intentional about.
I see no reason the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Remember, the 5th of November.
So, talk about parenting again here, boy. The way that Pharazôn turns on Kemen, Kemen's like, let's get him, Dad. And he's like, stupid kid. And it's really a bad relationship between those two.
First of all, speak when spoken to.
Yeah, and you wonder why Kemen hangs around. But of course, clutching to the tail end of power, I suppose.
Yeah, he has no power without his dad, right? Like his dad is the reason that anyone respects him. If he were the weakling he is, and I say that not as a force of physical strength, but like just this person with absolutely no convictions within them. Just this person who is a fair weather supporter. If he's not attached to the king of Númenor, he's nothing.
And to get back to David's earlier point, he has no pride. Kemen.
Or does he have only pride?
He looks like it, but it's only as a cover for the hollow inside him that says, I am worthless.
But isn't that a lot of pride? Like, I do think that a lot of pride is just kind of chest puffing, right? It is.
It can be. It can be. But, I mean, I think Elendil takes great pride in his abilities as a captain and so forth. He also knows when to set it aside. Yeah. In some respects, I think Kemen has pride, but it's a very brittle kind of pride that breaks at the first tap.
Yeah.
And then he's all the more, well, I'm going to show you. Because inside, that part of him inside is still saying, oh my gosh, I'm a worthless piece of you-know-what.
I'm sorry, picturing, based on what you said, I'm picturing Kemen trying to go and attack Elendil and his dad holding the back of his shirt with one finger, preventing him from moving forward while he runs.
Well, with his shoulder all racked up, no wonder. Only one finger will do it.
David?
Yeah, I was just going to say, too, and what's driving Kemen is trying to seek that approval of his parent.
Exactly.
And he's never going to get it. And every time he tries to get it, it gets
worse. And
then none of this would be going on if not for Kemen's screwing up. It really is his fault. And so...
Which screw up now are we talking about?
The whole situation with Elendil, from the time when he turns in his sword... Because if Kemen had just said, if they want to give him a captain, my captain, fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. And if he didn't smash the artifact in the temple,
sure,
to instigate the fight, none of this would have happened. But it's this little pride thing. Like
he was trying to show, I'm the big guy. Mm-hmm. I am the big guy. And interestingly enough, it wasn't he who claimed the authority in the scene with the Sea Guard. It was Eärien.
Mm-hmm.
By whose authority? Eärien is the one who says, by my authority.
Right. He was just sort of overseeing part of it.
He was standing in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really a really beautiful scene, I thought. And I love watching Eärien. Arian's face drop when her dad is like, he's behaving for a minute, and then he's just like, yeah, I'm not going through with the rest of this. And
yeah.
Like,
yes, the actor playing Eärien is just growing by leaps and bounds.
Right.
So we've got some more ritual coming up, but I just thought that lore book was something, Marilyn, with the big sea monster.
Very interesting. Yes. Yeah. Well, my response to that is, listen, Fadazon, strange monsters floating around in oceans spitting out queens is no basis for a system of government. Executive authority throws in the masses, not for some farcical aquatic ceremony. But seriously, it does raise some interesting questions, which I will come to when we come to that point. But perfect. Yeah, beautifully done, whatever. But holy cow, does it raise lore questions for me?
Yeah.
That's just very confusing, that whole thing. Also, like, why are the Valar involved in this at all? Like, why would they be involved with the sea monster? I don't understand that.
Yeah, well, I have thoughts, but we'll save them for when we get there.
All right, let's go over to Rune, where the Stranger and Tom are having a great time together. The Stranger has a vision of Nori and Poppy in trouble, including a rock falling from the sky. He awakens in the house of Tom Bombadil, who tells him the secret fire speaks to them. When the Stranger asks how to master the secret fire, Tom gently rebukes the Stranger and tells him to follow old Tom. So, secret fire for our listeners. I think of it as a Holy Spirit kind of thing. It is the essence of creation that is at the center of a creation.
It is that which Iluvatar alone has control over, and without which nothing actually lives. We saw that in the Silmarillion story about Ale and the creation of the dwarves. It wasn't until Iluvatar placed the secret fire within them that they became beings of their own.
Right.
Before that, they were just automatons. Interesting parallel here. He needs to master the secret fire.
Yes, I picked up on that too.
And then in the next, in Lord of the Rings, we see another character who says that they are the servant of the secret fire.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking of it in the power over or power of dynamic that we have, but I really like that callback for the Gandalf line, which is, I'm a servant of it. That's even better.
And I only just thought of it now, and it makes me even sadder because of the probable pointing towards who the stranger is.
Hey, look, if this isn't Gandalf, I mean, what are we doing here? This is Gandalf.
We're being really, really tricksy.
Yeah, I mean, look,
in a good way.
They were being tricksy last season. There was all the suggestion that the stranger was Sauron, and that was not true.
Yeah,
so maybe they are doing a lot of heavy pointing towards Gandalf, and it's not true. Going to be a blue wizard. I would be fine with that. I would also be fine with it being Gandalf.
Right.
I will be able to master my grief if that is, in fact, what happens.
I do feel it. We haven't had Tom that much, but I almost feel like this. Well, how am I supposed to get my powers? Thing is going on a little bit long. Like I want to. I was hoping
it's done.
It is done. Like it is now.
He's literally disappeared now. Tom has.
Yeah, literally. So.
And I also have to say, I really don't know how I feel about Tom using the "many that die deserve life."
Oh yeah, that comes up later.
That was a little too much.
Comes up later.
It was heavy-handed.
It was a bit over the top, I think.
Again, a Gandalf quote from the books. Does he do it in the movies? I think he does, right?
I think he does a truncated version.
Yes, in the Mines of Moria.
Many that. This is that scene is after the Harfoot scene. So, do you want to save that for now? Or?
I think you're right. All right, let's still talk about this one scene. I think we kind of nailed everything, right? This is just the secret fire discussion. Yeah.
Well, I just want to know who told the stranger that he has to master the power in order to use it. Where did he get this idea from?
Yeah, that's his. He's fumbling, trying to figure out how to. He doesn't know how to control it. That's a default thought or reaction. Here's this tool. How do I use it? I want mastery over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know 5 infomercials from Masterclass. You too can.
But how much mastering did he see with the Harfoots? I mean.
He sees
there's a difference between learning a skill and mastering a power, is my point.
He sees the White Wings, that they have power. They have they've mastered their powers.
Or maybe it's just the way that the Harfoots talk about power.
Away.
I don't know. But
in terms of modeling and seeing other people with other behaviors, that's what I'm saying.
Not convinced, but maybe there'll be something more at some point.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we'll do more Rings of Power. And we're back. Next up is the Store and the Harfoot. The raiders ride across the desert before we see Nori and Gundabal Earthhaller. That's the full name they gave the Gund. Having a heart-to-heart. Nori asks why the Stores don't leave to avoid the raiders, but Gundabal teaches her what home is. Nori suggests she turn herself in to save the Stores and Poppy, who has her first date and kiss with Merrimack. Poppy reminds Nori that the raiders want the Harfoots because of the stranger, and that turning herself in will put everyone at risk. They agree to fight the stranger. Fight for the stranger. I'm sorry, they don't fight the stranger. I just say, like, I was watching the scene, I was just so pleased that we're not going to have a character go on a stupid mission to like sacrifice themselves in vain just for the villain to be like, yeah, that's great. Thanks for getting here. I mean, especially when we have Galadriel falling into a trap in the same episode, I think it's good that like somebody had something smart to say later in the episode.
Not everybody was doing dumb things.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
We call that dumb person behavior.
Well, and there's this idea of my personal immediate well-being versus a wider communal well-being, and what are the choices there. And I think we see the stranger's going to grapple with that. We're going to see Galadriel grapple with that. We're seeing Elendil grapple with that. And I would imagine that that's something that I haven't studied Tolkien like you, Marilyn, but I believe that was a lot of what he was working on was how do you work through these issues, and what are these choices that you make in the face of all of these difficult circumstances where there's a lot at stake, there's a lot on the line.
Yeah, well, I made a little note saying Poppy wants to fight for the stranger wants to fight for Nori. Nori wants to turn herself in, so there won't be any fighting. But, of course, there would be anyway, regardless.
Exactly.
So, my question is, okay, so, what do the stores have? What do they got? What have they done in the past when the bandits come riding by and cause destruction and mayhem and whatnot?
I think Tolkien was somebody who understood, he was ideally a pacifist, but he also understood that sometimes there's no choice but to fight back.
Yeah, I think that sums him up pretty well, John. He would have rejected the name pacifist, and he even talks about Tom Bombadil as, representing the pacifist point of view in the Legendarium, but equally demonstrating how it would be next to impossible to maintain without the people who are willing to go to war and so forth. But he never valorized war. He valorized courage. And that's from the influence of all the the northern stories that he loved so much. Northern courage, he actually called it sometimes.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm projecting here, I have no idea, but it may wind up that the strangers will learn how to use his powers when he is confronted with, the fact that not just Nori's life, but all these people's lives are in danger.
And poor Merry Mac. He was named 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, these are interesting folks, aren't they?
Yeah, I love Poppy tries to give him mouse. He's like, 2 years old isn't that bad. And he's like, no, 2 years ago.
They were milking a snake.
Yeah, you can milk snakes.
I know you can.
Okay.
But this scene, and then she's like, lizard for dinner, and then it's like, what's up with the lizard? Is that like some sort of aphrodisiac? But this was a very there's a lot of euphemistic stuff going on.
You're making me think of Ben Stiller and Meet the Parents going, you can milk anything with nipples. And then Robert De Niro says, can you milk me, Greg? I have nipples.
I interpreted that comment as they had just kissed, and she said, oh, did you have lizard for dinner? I.e., that's what she's tasting when she kissed him.
Oh, I thought okay, that's interesting. No, I thought she was, okay. I thought she was asking for something specific, lizard, and then it's like, why would you want lizard? Is that an aphrodisiac?
No, yeah, no, I thought it was bad taste.
Okay, I get it. All right.
And
but anyway, they were still milking a snake.
No, I that completely went over my head.
I don't think dental hygienists are a lucrative career in the store community. It sounds like
probably not.
Yeah.
Though maybe they're wise enough to know to brush their teeth with.
Well, we talked about that. We're going to talk about that in Prey. Both Alicia and I were working on the outline today for that movie because they do show the heroine brushing her teeth with a stick, and there's a whole thing about stick toothbrushes, and she and I both went down in rabbit holes on that. So,
I had no idea it was a period piece until I turned it on, and I was like, "Wait, what am I watching?"
Right.
I had to make sure it was the right movie because there were actually 2 Preys, I think, on Hulu.
Yeah, there's a second one.
Wait, which one am I? And I did pick the right one, but I was like, wait, is this definitely it? Because I knew it was Predator. That's all I knew about it.
Well, if they're brushing their teeth with, bent twigs, then it's probably the 1700s.
That's like you with Ace Ventura and V for Vendetta.
Anyway.
John.
Wait, what? Huh? Oh, yes. It's better than that. I mixed up Ace Ventura and V for Vendetta. Absolutely.
So they use the word Smeal?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. And do we have a lore check for that?
Okay. Well, smiles are the names of the regions.
Okay.
Or the dwellings. And in our world, Tolkien groups will call themselves smiles.
Okay.
It's spelled S-M-I-A-L.
Oh, I have S-M-E-A-L. Okay.
Well, I think she pronounced it that way.
Okay. Because she has that very sort of broad country accent.
And that may be how the stores spell it.
The stores.
If they do spell, I don't know.
Stores. Yeah, they really lean into that. Ooh.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have written texts yet.
So is Smile, that's a neighborhood?
It was the name for some hobbit holes. I'm blanking now. People are going to write in. Please don't at me.
You can educate us, but just don't at us.
Right. Education, always welcome, as long as it's
clarification.
Filled with kindness.
Yes.
Yeah, they're the underground homes of hobbits.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it was just sort of a generic term that they had for their hobbit
dugout homes. Okay.
I guess store hole didn't sound as good as hobbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does kind of conjure up less than pleasant ideas, doesn't it?
I thought that whole conversation with Gund too brought up something interesting, which is, part of what Poppy was reacting to, which is, what is home? Mm-hmm. Where is home? Can you ever go back home? And if you go back home physically, is it still home? Because now you're thinking you've left. And now you've come back, and now you're reacting to your own memory of what home should be, your nostalgia of home, not what home is now, because you have changed.
And you don't know how they've changed.
And yes, exactly. So when Pippin and Merry go home, they're changed, and their community has been changed.
Yeah. And Jackson does that brilliantly with that one scene in the pub where the travelers have returned. They're sitting at a table in silence, and all around them, the usual hobbitry stuff is going on in the pub, and the massive pumpkin and all that kind of stuff. And they're just kind of sitting there, and they're looking at each other, and then they just toast each other silently and drink, because that's just not them anymore.
Yeah.
And I really thought it was an excellent way of capturing the feeling that veterans may feel upon coming back. They have experienced things that nobody else has experienced, and they probably feel they can never really convey. So how do you do that? But what I found interesting was that when Poppy first comes back, Nori asks her, how is everyone at home? And Poppy says about the same. So to your question, David, about home and how you feel about it and everything, I think for the Harfoots, home is the group that you travel with.
Right.
It's less about a physical location and it is about the community.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day may be true for everybody, but it's not what we first go to. The Gund is slapping her hand on the rocks and saying, this is home. Whereas for the Harfoots,
strong nostalgia, right? Almost treating nostalgia as home, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, treating those you love as home, treating those who raised you as home.
Yeah.
Treating your community, the ones you love and the ones you hate, as your home, because that's what they are.
It's maybe a less of a quote unquote ritual question, but I think it would be an interesting conversation with if you and Sarah talked about home and the place of home and rituals of home. I got married there, and we buried my husband there, and we live at kids. Yeah. There's a lot of ritual around home and the sense of what home is. That would be a really cool conversation.
I will put a pin in that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time to go find our kyber crystal here.
Yeah, I was going to say, are we going to go to Dagobah? Are we going to find a little short green man?
It was definitely both. Like it was both finding a kyber crystal and Yoda being all, choose you must.
Straight up Luke on Dagobah. Straight up.
I knew you were going to say that. The minute I turned that scene on, I was like, oh, he's giving a choice between saving his friends and staying to train.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I don't think the choice is friends or train. I think it's friends or figure it out yourself.
Well, he's got to figure it out so he can save his friends. But if he runs away to save his friends, he'll never figure it out.
Never figure it out.
Well, let me read the synopsis, actually. Tom brings a stranger to a field of dead trees to choose a staff, which Tom says will present itself to the wizard when the vision of his heart is aligned with the secret fire. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That was very good use of lore.
The stranger fears that Nori is in danger, but Tom gives a classic Tolkien quote about life and death before telling the stranger this is his one chance to be with Tom. It's his friend or his destiny. Which I think that was a misuse of it. Now, the more I think about it, the less I like it, because I actually don't think it captures the meaning of the Tolkien quote either.
I've got the quote here. So,
yeah,
many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. For even the very wise cannot see all ends. I have not much hope that Gollum can be cured before he dies. But there is a chance of it, and he is bound up with the fate of the ring. My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before the end. And when that comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not least.
All right, then, keep your secrets.
And the thing is, I think it's a false equivalency here.
Yeah, I agreed.
It's not about, here's a being and they deserve to die or to live. It's about, here's my friend who's in danger and here's the path that you're telling me I need to take instead to save the whole world. And he's not necessarily talking about, killing people or not killing people at this point.
Yeah, I really think that quote was not meant to say go be passive. That quote was meant to say don't be so quick to, execute someone. The whole context of this was that Frodo had just said, I wish, because he found out, I think it was right after Frodo found out that Gollum had basically given up the location of the ring, right? And Frodo's like, oh, well, Bilbo should have killed him. And he's like, I think you should take a step back, Mr. Frodo here. And Gandalf really calls him on it. He's like, if you can't resurrect the dead who were unjustly killed, then don't be so quick to send people to death. And I think that's absolutely fair. That's not the same thing as saying don't help your friend who's in trouble.
Mm-hmm. No, it really isn't. I mean, what a pity Bilbo did not slay him. Pity. It was pity that stayed his hand.
Yeah. Pity
and mercy not to slay without need. And, of course, that's pure Niennath speaking there, too, by the way.
Well, and this idea that, if you're eager to deal out death in judgment, it's not killing, it's not defending, it's not protecting, it's not, or even just being a preemptive strike necessarily, but are you judging? Gollum is this is actually really interesting when it comes to the whole orc question.
Yes, it is.
Because when you start to think, well, orcs are just bad, therefore we should just wipe them out, that is killing in the name of judgment.
Killing.
And there's an additional layer on all of this, because Frodo is remembering this conversation in his mind later at the edge of the Dead Marshes when they first encounter Gollum. And he's repeating the conversation in his memory, but he adds a line in that does not appear in A Shadow of the Past. And that line is it starts off, do not be so eager to deal out death and judgment, fearing for your own safety. That line was not present in Chapter 2, A Shadow of the Past.
Okay.
And Tolkien recognized that, according to Christopher, Tolkien recognized that difference when he went back to do his revisions, and he left them that way. So I'm almost hearing in that Frodo recognizing that the decision that someone deserves to die is much more about their own feelings of fear than about the strict judicial merits of the case, however you want to define that. And I just think it's fascinating, and I've not really ever heard anybody talk about it before. So there you are.
Yeah, and so I think I kind of let that line go in the moment when Tom says that, but the more that I think about it, I think this is a misplaced line. It was just like, yeah, it doesn't belong here.
It was a bum note.
I don't have a problem with them having used it. I just don't think that this was the place to use it.
This was not the context.
Yeah.
When I first heard it, of course, I was like, oh, I love this. And
exactly.
then I'm thinking, but why is he saying it now?
Yeah.
What is this? What's the relevance here?
Yeah, I think it was just a bum note, and that's okay. We don't have to linger on it. I just think they would have done better not using this or using it in another context.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. I do love at the end of the scene, though, the way that I'm assuming it was a drone shot, as they're pulling back and we're seeing the stranger standing on the cliffside. He's this little brown stick amongst all these other little brown sticks. And it really gave a great sense of scale and position and this just sort of sense of lost among many. And how do you deal with that with yourself? And he's supposed to be this savior figure, but yet he's just lost in the background of the landscape. So it was good.
And it made me think of the Antwives.
Huh. Yeah,
I know this is not the actual geographic location of the Brown Lands, which we'll be hearing about later perhaps, but that utter desecration of what was clearly once a grove of trees. And was that one of the gardens that the Antwives had planted that they had to
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Cool.
I think that'd be a cool detail. Well, I guess we'll see next episode whether the stranger chose to find his kyber crystal or move along to Cloud City to save his friends. Is that where Luke went?
Yeah, he went to Cloud City.
Okay.
Yeah. Bespin.
Okay. All right, let's go to Digging Too Deep. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm dig deeper into the mountain as more and more tributes are brought to Durin III. Sauron arrives to request more mithril in exchange for lumber, or perhaps something more precious. But the king refuses. When Durin IV praises his father, the king suggests that he's just waiting for the elves to up their offer. Durin the Younger accuses his father of being under control of the ring, and when the king refuses to remove it, his son tries to forcibly take it from him, leading the elder to strike down the younger. Durin the Older orders Narvi to double his digging efforts. After hearing what happened, Disa makes an impassioned plea to work together to stop her father-in-law before the kingdom is taken down with him.
So the opening of this scene where we're coming up from the mines up through was one of those Jackson comparison scenes below Orthanc, below Sauron's tower, where we sort of pan up from where all the orcs are, creating their war machine. So it was a nice comp in some ways.
Yeah,
I missed that.
So this is escalated, one might say. The father striking down the son, something I didn't expect. Other than the fact that it was in the trailer.
I was going to say, how many times did you watch the trailer, John?
I know. They did a good job of mostly only putting early episode stuff in the trailers.
Yes,
but this was one I wish they would have saved. I think this would have been a better shock if it was not in the trailer.
You could have done a number of other shots. I mean, I really think the King's Gold Lust has gone a bit over the top now. I mean, okay, we get it, right? You don't have to show them piling up, piles of gold.
No, I want them to show it. That's awesome.
And how long did it, how quickly can dwarven smiths turn gold ore into all these beautiful, I don't know. It's
a good question. I don't think they are. I think that they are doing it at a normal pace or, maybe a little bit more extra pace. But I think these are the taxes coming in, right? These are things that people have saved up.
That's what
the savings
thank you.
The people of Khazad-dûm.
Thank you for that enlightenment.
Yeah, no, they're not mining it and it's coming out as coins.
Yeah, I mean, that, as I say, that kind of puzzled. So
I wanted to ask, what do you think of this whole Disa's really just suddenly coming in and saying, we gotta chain ourselves to the tree. We gotta make sure the bulldozer can't come to town and they can't put up the new shopping mall.
I think this is a master singer who knows the mountain like her own body, saying, this has got to stop. And someone who has a very good sense of politics saying, if the king is this wacko, our whole kingdom is in grave danger.
Yeah.
My only thought on that was, at least at the tail end of this scene, where she's talking about if he does raise a hand to us, then the whole kingdom will see, right? That'll expose him. And then he'll lose his crown. But then he's a king. How do dwarves choose their kings? Is there some sort of popular referendum? I don't know. That's
kind of what they did with Númenor, didn't they? They were not happy with Tar Palantir, and so they said, all right, you are going to be on the back burner and your daughter is going to rule as regent.
Yeah, but that's Númenor and humans. That's not dwarves.
But we're still all dealing with medieval fantasy inspired, patterns of watery tarts throwing, sharp objects.
Right. But we've already seen the king disinherit his son once. So what's the big deal if he changes his mind yet again and says, nope, both you and now your wife are also, go play with your friends, the elves. You're out of here.
I just have to do a quick Game of Thrones callback when Sean Bean is as the hand of the king. He says, I anoint him and I attaint him. And I just love the way that he... I love that word, attaint.
I can raise you up and I can throw you down.
Yeah.
And forgive me, this is what I was going to ask. Have we done the Annatar bit already? Or
we haven't talked about it much. I did read it out, but yeah.
But it is there, yeah. I just thought that was bizarre that he was going to Khazad-dûm. And
no, he said he would, right?
I know, but why? Do we really need another Balrog hint? I mean, come on, people.
I thought it was more that he wanted to get his... Because did he speak? He did speak directly to Doran Third. I was trying to remember if Doran was at the...
no, he did, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think he wants to reinforce... First of all, I'm sure he wants to know how it's going with the Dwarven rings, because these are the first rings that are meant to corrupt, right?
Oh,
and
okay.
So I think
that's a good point. I like that.
If I had a big project... again, it's all about project management. And somebody titled one of their reviews, it's all about project management, and it made me laugh so hard.
I saw that. And the other thing I figured out was Annatar telling them that Eregion is about to be besieged was also a good drop because of something that is going to happen if they follow the lore. And maybe this is a Frodo clip at this moment, and I won't continue unless you tell me that I can say this out loud. Something that Prince Doran is going to do as a result of this.
I don't remember, but I don't think we should say something he's going to do.
All right.
So
and keep your secrets.
Right,
now that you mention it, there is a little there's a little geographical hand waving here, because if there's at least 3 or 4 legions of orcs out in the forest, immediately across the river outside of Eregion. Yeah, Annatar, Sauron, he's tricksy like that. But then how does he get there and back to go see the dwarves? It's just a little hand wavy.
Damp again.
It's fine.
Annatar.
Moving on.
Because Maiar. What I want to know is, how did all those legions get from Mordor to Eregion?
And how do you be in Eregion and not know that there are multiple legions outside your doorstep? I'm sorry.
Well,
anyway,
King Doran has the answer. The whole world has gone mad. We must grip it right.
That's true. I just had to let that steam off and then move on with the plot. It's fine. It's not a deal breaker.
And I just say, his preparations to be a weapons dealer to make them out of mithril is really chilling.
Oh yeah, and right. An army.
Durin's grief for his father is heartrending.
Yeah,
it's all of this stuff just, in the pressure cooker. Just amazing.
It almost reminds me of a real world thing. Again, we're not going to talk about modern politics, but there is a real world thing where parents get sucked into cults and their kids don't find them recognizable anymore, right? And the same thing for versa. Parents to kids, right? Kids have fallen into cults and their parents are like, what happened to my kid? Mm-hmm. And I think this is almost like losing a family member to a cult here.
Interesting. It's certainly losing it to an obsession.
And that was really interesting, wasn't it? Because that was that whole... You could even say it's not necessarily a cult of an ideological cult or a quasi-religious cult. Addiction can do the same thing, right? To different substances.
Oh, it's
and I almost read it like he's like, show me you are not addicted by taking off the drink. Show me you're not addicted to the substance by stop taking that substance.
Yes.
And he's like, I got nothing to prove to you, so
smack.
Smack.
Which proves the point far more than any else other thing that he could have said or done.
The lots of precious, the use of the word precious.
Oh yeah.
It's mine. It belongs to me. And then Bear slips in that little music cue, which is just the beginning note of the One Ring theme in the Jackson movies. Mm-hmm. And you're like, ooh,
And I could have done with just the music cue. I mean,
you didn't need the precious.
Let's
and
not
it's mine.
lean into the precious. We've already had a precious reference prior to this, and it's okay. We get it. They're rings. Move along.
Remember, but also. You got to remember, Marilyn, you and I are watching this, and we've watched the movies about 1 million times. But a lot of people are coming to this, and they're like, yeah, I saw this in the early 2000s, and it was fun.
That's a very good point.
I'm coming back now, and they're like, see? Remember this line? I think they do need to do that every now and then.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking you're going to say that they need to do it for the people who don't know from Tolkien and are coming to all of this
that
just
too.
cold.
I think that exists.
That makes even more sense.
I think it's less common. I think probably
I'm
more
sure
people come to it from seeing the Lord of the Rings movies. But I think
go ahead.
Many more people have only seen the movies than have gone as deep as we have.
Oh, of course.
And that's a narrow path to walk from the spectrum of, academics, people who've been studying Tolkien their entire lives through to the, I saw that movie, or I heard of that movie, to the barest of fans, and to be able to weave that's pretty tough.
Yeah, it is.
Was so when we got the little baby Balrog thing, was he kind of the way I read it was he was invoking the spirit of the Balrog. He's like, okay, fine, you're not going to give me some mithril, but I'm going to send a text message to my Balrog friend down there and wake, hey, you up? It's time to not chill. It's time to wake up and start raging. To me, it kind of was him using his mystical powers to tap on the shoulder of the Balrog.
Yeah, I like that. I was also thinking it's him verifying that the Balrog is there.
Okay, and that works too.
And able to, respond to his commands when needed.
Communicating on MyRNet.
Yeah, exactly.
FireNet. What are you talking about?
FireNet. What's their favorite browser for web searching? Firefox. Okay. All right. One last plea here.
Are you calling me a Maiar, David? I mean, John. I'm always. Yeah. Carry on.
Well, what's your title on the Discord is a Valar, aren't you?
I guess I am.
You are. Very exciting. All right, one last plea here. Aarion tries to convince her father to swear fealty to Pharazôn. He refuses, saying there is nothing left for them to say to each other. Miriel arrives to tell Elendil to bow to the king, but he assures her that he has faith in the Valar, and that if they wish him to live, then he will.
It is hardly mercy to ask a man to set his integrity aflame.
Yeah,
if after all this you see is pride, then there are no words left for us to speak. Woof! Yeah. So good. Yeah.
And
they really nailed the scene.
Aarion has groveled and licked the floor for permission to bring Muriel to see Elendil. So what happened to no one kneels in Númenor? Some change in tone in the court here.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that.
This.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good one.
Oh, yeah. And then Muriel begging Elendil to bow to Pharazôn. And the response, the sea is always right.
Yeah.
Which is such a wonderful reinterpretation of that concept. It's not about the power of the sea and it's always going to beat you if you do anything wrong. It's about the sea is a deeper representation of the Valar.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're back to Ulmo is the sea, and Osse and Uinen.
Okay.
Yeah, and Ulmo sends messages through the sea, right? Those who are listening will hear them.
And through the sea creatures.
Interesting, because I was actually just thinking to myself when I was watching that particular part was, this our sea in the primary world is indifferent, but in their sea in the Middle East, in Middle Earth, is
in the Middle East. I like that. That's
sorry.
You're almost in the real world, but you're still a little bit. You're 1 foot in each world.
In the middle world.
A little bit. Theirs is an alive. It's a myth. It's part of their mythology. It's part of the
and it has sentience.
Yeah, interesting.
It's actually a very indigenous notion.
Sure.
That the world around us is alive and we communicate with it and it communicates with us.
So, and that makes sense
Valar,
then.
The spirit of the sea.
Which is why then the sea worm is an avatar of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. That was a complete accident. I didn't want to do the James Cameron Avatar thing. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
What was that movie even about? You know,
it was about white saviors and ecological disasters, and
a fair point, Marilyn.
Oh, that's exactly what it was. I mean, it was. I just got so tired of it.
Yeah,
kind of pivoting off that. I did have a thought, and this goes to Elendil's attitudes here. This line of faith and fanaticism, well, I don't know if it's a line, but this idea that, I have this faith and it calls me to action, but when does that action become fanaticism?
I think fanaticism is in the eye of the observers.
Sure.
And not in the eyes of the enactor.
So this idea that, okay, well, I'm gonna do this really crazy thing, and everybody else is going, that's crazy, you shouldn't do that, but I have my faith. Like, that's in this exactly context, what
Eowyn is saying.
What's that?
Eowyn is saying, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You're fanatic.
Yeah.
Give this up.
Yeah.
Elendil is saying, this is who I am. It's a part of my very being.
Right.
Is that fanaticism?
I was trying to think of a test there, or just kind of tease that out a little bit. And does your fanaticism benefit more people than just yourself or just your immediate community? Then maybe we could say, oh, okay, well, that's not destructive fanatic behavior, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it also calls into question who gets to decide what a fanatic is. And usually it's the dominant culture. And it's more of a power over kind of a concept. What you decide to do with your life is one thing. What you base those decisions upon is another. And some people will say, well, of course you should save your life because that's, biological imperative. What do you want to call it? But if someone says, I am willing to risk my life for this, it's only fanaticism in the eyes of the people who don't hold your beliefs, which is precisely what Eowyn is saying.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on this, especially if we try to bring this over to the real world. Like, my dad used to tell me this little allegory. He might have come up with, he might have read it somewhere, I don't know. When I was a kid, he used to say, a man's stuck in a hurricane zone, and a day before the hurricane, he's told, you got to evacuate. And he says, no, my faith in God will save me.
Oh, this one. Yeah, I know this story.
You know? Okay.
I sent you this, and I sent you this.
Right.
Yeah.
What are
the
you
boat
doing
comes
stuck
to
on the
rescue
roof?
him. If just for people who don't know it, if we're going to yada yada through this,
it was also in the West Wing, so.
Was it really?
It was.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's like then a guy, the water's rising. Somebody comes in a boat to save him, and then somebody comes in a helicopter to save him a day later. And eventually he dies, and he goes to the pearly gates, and he says, "God, why didn't you save me?" He goes, "I sent you a warning. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter." And so I do think that there is something to be said. Whether if you are a person of faith, you don't have to wait for a miracle. Some miracles can be ordinary things. And so when I see Muriel not even try to swim, I'm a little like, oh, I don't love the messaging of that, right? Like
if she's blind, where is she supposed to swim to?
That's fair.
How does she know where to go?
But don't you think Elendil would have done a similar thing?
But then she was submitting herself to the sea.
Yes.
Right?
But again,
waiting for judgment. That's the way I read that.
And I think Elendil would have done the same thing if Muriel had not insisted on substituting for her.
Whatever happened to that "don't test God" bit from the Hebrew Bible? I mean, we really
is the reverse of that. It's the reverse of that. It's that we are putting people to a test that we are asking God to judge. I've got a whole section here on trial by ordeal if you're interested in it.
Great.
I have mixed feelings.
So actually, I want to go back.
One does, unless one is in that place of utter convincement.
So going back to faith and fanaticism, it's one thing if you're self-sacrificing for your faith.
Yes.
Versus
absolutely.
I'm going to use my faith and my fanaticism to go over there or even stay here and use that faith and fanaticism to dominate and control others that are not of my faith and fanatic, or even within my own faith. I'm going to use it as a way to dominate and control. So I think that's where I was going. Like I was thinking that's where my mind went to, was the external action as opposed to the internal I'm going to allow myself to be sacrificed for my faith. I think there's a right. And even someone who decides to engage in protest actions and glue themselves to the street for a cause. Initially, it appears that they're the only ones who are bearing the brunt of whatever consequences there are of this.
Yeah.
Does that person have a family? Are there children?
Right.
They're paying a consequence too. Have you talked with them about it in advance? Have you come as a family to that decision? Have you acknowledged that even with that permission, if that's what you want to call it, you are hurting your family, and they are hurt, and they are angry and upset.
Right.
It's and as we see, Elendil is cutting the final ties with his daughter.
Yeah.
His last remaining child.
Yeah.
But I actually really liked how he didn't argue with her much, right? He was just like, look, if you are that far down the path, I can't help you.
Because I am this far down my path.
Right. We are not speaking the same language anymore.
Yeah.
And he says exactly that. That's a really good way to phrase that, John, is that there are no words left for us to speak, is what he says.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this goes back to this idea that a person is their word, right? We don't have, and this comes up in our conversation around the movie Prey when we record that tomorrow morning. And there was something that happens in that movie that made me think, oh, well, get out your phone and take a picture of this so that you can show everybody else what's going on. It's like, no, you can't do that because this is, the 1700s. And then it made me think, when I, as a person, would go from this community to that community, if I was a trader or a traveler or moving around, and the people in this other place didn't know me, I am my word. And if we don't all have a cultural norm that what I am, David, son of Richard, if that's not true, if I'm bullshitting or I'm lying, then I'm breaking the social compact, because there is no other truth telling. There is no fourth estate necessarily in these other times and in other formations of society. And so when Elendil says, if you're asking me to set my pride aside, then forgot the pride, but he's saying, that I'm not going to self-immolate my integrity.
Right.
Because my word is, I am my word, and my word is me.
Yes. And this is why we come across trial by ordeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A community that can't decide would, in essence, turn it over to the deity, however they understood that to mean. And this goes all the way back to biblical ordeals in Judaic times. And as late as the 1800s in England, they were using a form of trial by ordeal. And it might be ordeal by fire, which could be walking on hot coals, or carrying hot iron in your hand, and then seeing a couple of days later, were your wounds miraculously healed or were they festering? And that determines your innocence or guilt. And then by water, trial by water, hot water, cold water, and probably better known, trial by combat, and you choose a champion to fight for you. This was introduced by the Normans in 1066 or thereabouts. And that was the thing that continued in England as late as 1810. So you see it in Persia, you see it in African natures and Hindu cultures. They all had different trials. But the principle was, if the person on trial was innocent, they would be protected from the death or the damage by the deity, or by the virtue of their truth, if you will. And then you get the witch trials, of course, at the 17th century. The person would be had their hands and feet tied together and tossed into deep water. Mm-hmm. If they floated, they were guilty. If they sank to the bottom, they were innocent, but they were probably also drowned.
If you just weighed them against a duck,
exactly.
I think you'd have an easier time determining.
So
in the
this is
the
another
culture
version of that,
of dueling, right, as well, because we're going to resolve by combat. So yeah, same thing. I'm just thinking of the movie The Duelist by Ridley Scott.
Oh, okay. But this also raises all kinds of questions for me. If the worm is supposed to be a carrier of the will of Valar, does that mean that when it was chasing the ship in season 1, it was because Sauron was on board and the Valar were trying to get him? And then how was Sauron able to overpower the will of the Valar and the worm in season 2, which we saw him do? He just kind of hung there in the water staring at the worm when the worm turned around and went away. So, I don't know. And it was an interesting comment when Farazan says he's trying not to antagonize the faithful, and I think that's kind of a day late and hour short. Just saying. And also, the horns are beautiful and their tone is beautiful, but can the sea worm really hear them underwater?
Yeah.
That's a little questionable.
Or can we hear the sea monster from the surface? So
how long have they been practicing this?
Mm-hmm.
How long have they been summoning a sea creature? I'm wondering what Osse and Oinen and Olma would think about all this. And clearly it backfired on the King's Men because they didn't believe in any of this superstitious nonsense, but they still believed they could summon the creature.
Yeah. And they happen to have the horns, like you said.
Right, and expect it to, make fish chow out of whoever wound up going in the water. So it's very dramatic, though, I have to say. And of course, when Amelia was rescued, I knew that she was going to substitute herself, partly because of trailers, but still.
Yeah.
I foresaw that happening.
Trailers there. Stop spoiling things in trailers.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to, I suppose, but even so.
Just show me a picture of some pretty rings and I'll come. All right, let's keep going because we've already been an hour 45 almost. Let's zoological protest, I'm calling this. Narvi brings his team to begin digging deeper, but finds Disa standing in the way. When he tries to have her removed, she sings to summon a swarm of bats, which chase the miners away. Doran 4 comes out of the shadows in support and Disa tells him this is only the beginning. He's like,
somebody who really knows how to use
I will remain out of sight in support. I will quietly support you from behind this pillar.
I don't have a lot to say about
this. If he probably would have jumped in if things had gotten bad.
They really needed some Ozzy Osbournes there to handle the bats, but they just didn't have them in stock.
Well, I thought it was Disa as Batwoman, so that was my basic comment. What do you have, David?
Nothing. I have nothing to say about this.
Oh, okay.
I like that they teamed up. They faked me out with Doran being behind the pillar. Like I thought he didn't show up, and he did. He did, which was good.
Mm-hmm.
Trial by Abyss. I think we've already talked a lot about it, the background for a minute. I feel like we've been discussing this the whole episode. But horns blow as the Númenorians summon a sea worm for trial by Abyss, which I do love the name of that, by the way. Elendil prepares to be thrown in the water, but Miriel comes to take his place, as is her right. Pharazôn learns he must, by the letter of the law, allow the substitution, and so he accepts it. Miriel is thrown in and pulled down, where the sea worm roars at her. Before Belzegar can declare her guilty, she's brought back to the surface alive, and he announces the innocent verdict. Elendil reintroduces her as Tar Miriel, Queen of the Sea, and the onlookers cheer for her. Pharazôn looks into the Palantir and sees the summit of Mount Doom and a vision of Sauron as Halbrand.
But does Sauron then see a vision of Pharazôn at the same time?
Well, here's a question, because wasn't the whole thing of the reason that you could see Sauron in the Palantir of Orthanc in the Lord of the Rings, because Sauron had one of the Palantiri.
They're just not using it that way at all.
Yeah.
They're using it for foreshadowing and goodness knows what else at this point. I'm not. If they do have some sort of a system in mind, I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
I do love the CGI for the Palantiri, though. It looks great. The way
that was so
out.
Cool.
Yeah.
The cracks. I was like, we should have had this one in Lord of the Rings. But edit that in post. If George Lucas can do it.
I wanted to jump back quickly to something that from the prison scene, and then that goes into this. Are you guys picking up on a romantic love developing between Miriel and Elendil?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm of two minds. Again, we have to remember that Miriel has no sight. And so any kind of contact may be necessary to establish connection other than looking from eye to eye. At the same time, it does make me uncomfortable, and I really hope they're not going there.
There seems to be a depth.
I don't think they are, but...
Yeah, because she was saying that just the way that they were acting and reacting, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to sacrifice myself," and she's like, "But what about my feelings?" Forget she was saying multiple things. Well, for the realm and for the good of everyone, but also what about me? Because I have and I interpreted what she was saying was that I have feelings for you.
That may have been part of it. I interpreted it as, if you go, I am literally friendless and alone.
Okay. And that's true also.
I have no champion.
Right.
I have no one to speak on my behalf. And as she says, we need someone strong to hold
all
the faithful together in that way. And I cannot be that if Pharazôn is going to claim the throne. Now, what's going to happen now? It was a glorious moment and I cried at her acclamation. But I wonder what sorts of horrors are going to be visited upon the faithful as a result of all this. You know that Pharazôn isn't going to lie down and roll over. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So, and he turns instead to that elvish trinket that Eärien was so dismissive of.
He has concepts of a plan, but he's working on
it. Moving on, unless you have something else for this.
I just had to call these two comps out really quick with this pool scene. I got both Foundation Season 2. We had a similar pool scene.
That's what it reminded me of. Yeah. Thank you, John. David, thank you.
And then the other one was the Black Panther movie. They have a trial by combat in a pool of water this. And so... Nice.
I really didn't understand how that was supposed to work or how we were supposed to understand that working.
The construction was all wacky about how she got...
she's walking along above water and all of a sudden, whoosh, she falls underneath. Yeah. And then later on she's...
spat out like Jonah.
What? Oh, like Jonah. I like that.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good image to hold.
And she was wearing white, and the way there were some things that seemed almost like a wedding scene to me in some ways. It was a ceremonial scene, but there was almost some touching of a wedding in some ways.
Sure. Well, in Venice, the Doge for hundreds of years would go out in a gondola in the middle of the larger sea area there and toss a wedding ring into the ocean as a symbol of the Doge marrying the sea.
Huh. Interesting.
So
that's cool.
I don't know if they're thinking that or not.
And now the sea is on the ground in Venice because that's how the world works.
No
now.
kidding.
Have you seen those TikToks or videos of how underwater Venice is right now?
No,
it's bad right now. Like people are going around with rain boots on all day, the whole time. Yeah, it's really pretty awful. But I'm beginning to get a new layer of the sea is always right when Elendil claims that as his justification for going ahead with the trial by Abyss when he's in jail talking about it with Miriel. And she's saying, how can you do this? And he said, well, the sea is always right. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. All right, let's go to a tenuous alliance. Galadriel says Sauron is in Eregion forging rings to dominate the peoples of Middle-earth, and that he will not flee until that is accomplished. She agrees to an alliance with Adar to stop him and says Elrond will soon arrive with an army and Nenya to seal the city. Finally got a ring name, right? She's like, my ring, Nenya. The way she announces it, I feel like it was supposed to be like a Scott Pilgrim close-up of an artifact here. Adar presses Galadriel for a commitment on the future of the orcs, but she will not give a definitive answer. Adar thanks her for the information and says he will use it to destroy both Eregion and Sauron. She says Adar is playing into his hand and taking the bait, but he orders her bound. Adar blows the war horn and the orcs move to Eregion.
Yeah, I didn't really see how it could end well, and it didn't.
Yeah. And we talked about kind of the deception before, but David?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we did talk a lot about sort of all this already, but something that I had here on my notes was the extent to which Galadriel now is very, very almost fundamentally compromised.
Yeah.
She is so affected by Adar, who and originally compromised by Halbrand Sauron. And so what does that mean for her leadership, for her ability to hold trust to hold Gil-galad's trust and to lead troops when anytime she comes up against powerful beings or anybody who's got some wits about them, she is manipulatable, right? So maybe that's why she needs to wear Nenya to keep herself sort of healed in some way. I don't know.
And what is that next meeting with Elrond going to look like?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting question. I hadn't thought about that.
And it would have looked a heck of a lot worse if she had arrived riding next to Adar in front of the orcs. So at least that has been spared.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is she going to tell everybody though that what she did?
At this point, I kind of think the answer is yes. But
yeah, I think I know where this is going because of the trailer. There was a line that kind of spoils, I think, where Galadriel is going. And again, this is all non-canon, so this is not like us being cutesy about book lore.
Yeah, I have a theory what's going to happen, but maybe you'd rather I'd not.
Let's
play your little
save it.
Play your little
Let's
clip.
save it. Yeah. Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Keep your secrets.
I don't want to overuse this. You know what I mean? It's getting a little old already. I'm sick of it already.
It's no longer demure.
But I wanted to bet some internet points. Never mind. I'll put it on the Discord.
We got to keep Frodo around. By the way, did anyone see Athena A sharing on the Discord this summary of Frodo's journey?
No, I've been on.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Imagine, it says Frodo's journey is so wild. Like, imagine your uncle goes missing after his birthday party and his old stoner friend from out of town tells you that the souvenir he brought back from a Vegas trip 80 years ago is actually Satan's mood ring. And now zombie assassins are coming to burn down your town unless you and your lawn guy meet up with a medieval hosier in a dark gastropub.
That really was awesome. Brilliant. That is awesome.
David, your face is changing color.
Pretty good. Thanks, Athena, for sharing that.
It was terrific. Absolutely fantastic.
Man, that is great. That's something like Hunter S. Thompson would write. Like, could you imagine a gonzo version of The Lord of the Rings?
It's even better than what Mad Magazine did with Lord of the Rings.
Oh, Lord of the Rings was a book that we read incessantly. That copy got passed around a lot when I was a kid. I think I read Lord of the Rings before I read Lord of the Rings.
I wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Well, I guess we'll see what happens with the orcs next time.
Oh, something interesting. The elven forces are now in Mordor or heading towards Mordor, but all of the orc forces are up here now. So that's an interesting sort of swirling around. And then we'll see what Númenor does.
Right. I wonder if Elrond will have the ring with him or if he'll leave it with Gil-galad.
Yeah, I mean, that's another question.
Ooh, could you wear 2 rings?
He doesn't have to wear it.
You could,
it's
but...
safe in a pouch.
Yeah. I don't think he wants to wear the ring,
Elrond is wearing it? Come on.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to wear it at all. Annatar's power is the last scene here. In Eregion, the siege alarm sounds and Celebrimbor tries to see what's going on, but Sauron tries to stop him, and Celebrimbor pushes him away. Before the elf can go outside, Annatar puts a veil over his eyes, so that when he sees the city, he sees it happy and at peace. Annatar gives Celebrimbor mithril powder and the Hammer of Feanor, and tells him the Rings of Power will make the Silmarils forgotten. Celebrimbor returns to the forge to make the Manish rings, and Annatar smirks as the orcs besiege the city.
I like the way that Annatar was manipulating him, saying that the rings are going to be greater than the Silmarils.
Oh,
right.
That was like,
and he calls them
Precious.
precious.
Yes,
Yes, the
precious
P word.
again. Yep, I got it here too. Yeah.
Celebrimbor was aroused at that sentence.
Swing, as they used to say.
Best Feanor, best yourself. One last time. I mean,
and then that was Feanor's hammer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It absolutely was. It's funny, when I first watched it, I thought he'd actually crushed Feanor's hammer and turned it into the mithril dust, because I wasn't sure where he'd gotten the mithril dust for, since he said no. But then when I watched it a second time, I saw he had them both behind his back when he first walked out. So first it was the dust, and then it was the hammer. And I mean,
so where did he get the mithril from? That's a good question.
Hello. I mean, again, Sauron, on his way out, he could, cloak himself in darkness and just go to the nearest mine, because he could suss it out and, scoop up some dust and be on his way.
And he says Narvi gave it to him. Do you think he
Bodhi down in the pit?
No, I don't think he. Well, I mean, he could have gotten Narvi to give it to him, but I think it would have been complicated, because I think Narvi is surrounded by people who are doing all the digging, and how do you get him off by himself?
Also, it's finely ground. Why was it finely ground? What happened?
Sauron, Maiar.
Yeah.
Maya, excuse me. This is the jazz handy thing now that we can do. Now we're seeing.
And we're two episodes left.
Really,
so
we don't have time for those kinds of niceties, I suppose. I have to say, when I saw these peaceful scenes, quote unquote, in the trailers, I thought, golly, that looks fake.
Yeah.
So when it actually turned out to be fake, I said,
But maybe if you are worked to the bone and you are desperate for any good news, you're like, all right, my eyes are telling me that this is a happy city, and I'm just going to let it be while I go do my work.
Yeah, but I mean, it was already after dark before he walked outside. He walked outside into daylight. That could have been a clue, but as you say...
I think he's lost track of time completely.
Yeah, his mind is completely gone. I expect that once the first firebomb actually lands, he might finally realize that there's something wrong.
Yeah, maybe.
One can only hope.
Maybe.
One can only hope.
There was, on a filming thing, there was a cool day to night transition with the camera doing a spin around, and we go from day to night, which is a nice rotational thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got big time Siege of Gondor vibes with the trebuchet things throwing stuff up. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah.
And now we have a penultimate episode to see what happens. We're going to have a big fight.
Yeah, and I expect they're going to leave us hanging almost as much as they did with this episode on the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, last season's penultimate episode made a lot of people angry. That was the pyroclastic flow.
You're right. People were
And may I never utter that phrase again.
Oh, you love it. I mean, you've already embraced with our hearts bigger than our feet, John. So it's just a matter of time before pyroclastic flow.
We
goes
just don't
the
need to
same way.
say it ever. We could just be like, okay, things happened in season 1. Season 2 is a lot better. I like season 2.
Season 2 is definitely a lot better. Unquestioned.
I think a full fireball is going to fall on Celebrimbor, and he's going to be like, "Oh, I must have touched some hot water."
Well, possibly, but he did finally have his one moment of absolute rebellion before Sauron takes him out to see his beautiful city when he says, "I've had enough of you telling me what to do."
Right.
Well, again, day late and $1 short.
Yeah. I know. He's too far in. And I think that's interesting because this whole season, they've kind of been layering the whole, like, once Sauron's in, it's really hard to get him out.
Yes. The whole tree roots image and the snaky slime. And yeah.
So I like that they built this. This is not a sudden thing.
No, they definitely worked it up pretty much over most of season 2.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we got a whole season of Charles Dance becoming Charles Edwards, sorry. Charles Edwards becoming more and more into Annatar, or Hot Sauron, as some of the kids say.
I think you mean Charlie Vickers becoming more into Annatar.
No, I'm saying Charles Edwards Celebrimbor becoming more and more like enamored with. Okay,
I missed that
Annatar.
part.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that part. And I think now the people who are questioning why he was cast as Celebrimbor in season 1 are getting their answer.
Yeah, I did not like the portrayal in season 1. I think I went down saying, like, I'm just really not feeling it. But he's really doing an amazing job in season 2, and I get it.
Yeah, I mean, season 1 was not his time to shine. He was there, and he was, they were laying track and whatnot. But wow,
right. All right, let's close this thing out. If you want to send feedback, send it to lotr@thelorehounds.com or go to our website and head to the contact page. You can get everything in the show notes, including the link tree where you can subscribe for premium content such as our Lorecasts and our show guide. Plenty of great stuff happening right now. David, you want to tell me what's coming? Very quick.
What synopsis. Has come is we had I finally got the Alien Romulus podcast out.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
So I heard the very beginning.
Okay. Big
Sounded
editing.
great.
We start with our spoiler-free hot take. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, you can listen to about the first 15 minutes or so.
Well, I went in further because I'm never going to see it. So
okay.
Spoiler schmoiler.
Fair enough.
I've already heard that it was off the Pekila scale. So
right. Yes.
I'm good.
Well, John, we've got a lot going on. Let me give a quick shout out first to our newest podcast, Never Mind the Music.
Yes.
Mark and Nicole, he is a music professor. She's a psych professor. And they take a song and they take it apart. And it's really cool. Like the third episode they had out, Crossroads by Bone Thugs and Harmony. They talk about grief. And I never thought about the stuff that they were talking about. Or when they do a episode on The Sign by Ace of Base, they talk about Jung's collective consciousness stuff. It's really great. And then the one that they released today was the cover songs. And that was an amazing, I didn't finish it yet, but it was such a good little sidetrack podcast. So go to their podcast now, stop what you're doing, go subscribe. They do a wide range of songs. So even if you're like, oh, that's all, I'm not interested in that, just listen to them because what they're talking about is really fascinating. And the way
I don't know from any of the music that they're starting with, but it doesn't matter, listeners, because they deconstruct it and put it back together again in such a way that is fascinating, and you don't really have to know.
Exactly. That's a really good point.
It for you.
You never mind the music, one might say.
Never mind the music.
Exactly.
And I did listen to the whole cover episode, and it was fantastic. So everybody don't pay no attention to them calling it a sidetrack. Don't let that dismiss you. This is essential content.
It is essential. We're Jean and Alicia are starting up on Agatha. That starts this week. I think in a couple of days, 2 episode drop. And then in November, Alicia's going to be joining me for Dune Prophecy. We're going to be covering that week to week. Jean and Alicia are covering Agatha week to week. And then Silo is coming out before the end of the year too, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, everybody's tired.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, I'm exhausted. Jean and Alicia. Alicia is like one of the hardest working people in all of podcastingdom.
She is a powerhouse.
Her and Jean also recorded their new podcast, which is called Comics Versus. That's their new topical podcast, and they do a big thing on the end of the DCEU and the rise of the DCU. And so that's a very interesting conversation. Oh, and then they did an Agatha prep conversation as well. So that was really cool. And then they're going to be doing some coverage of the Penguin and the Joker 2 movie. So I don't know how they're going to cover all of that, but that's coming. Plus, we have Spooktober coming up, and we're covering Poltergeist, and Alicia's doing a whole bunch of that of coverage for that as well as recording a Beetlejuice episode, I think tomorrow.
Thursday. But
yeah,
the day this recording happens, she's going to record that.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be on it, and then I had more travel added to my life.
This is
and now
the
I'm not on
pod.
it. Yeah.
This one is scheduling on this Beetlejuice.
This guys, this is a miracle that this pod is getting recorded tonight because we had so many scheduling issues with this.
Wild.
Yes, indeed.
And then she's planning for Wicked as well, which is going to come out later this year.
And I think I may be going along with Wicked too.
Cool.
We'll see.
And then I've got a couple of special projects. I just wrapped up on Alien Romulus. I've got one more podcast for our Alien coverage this year, which is going to be community reactions. I'm going to be talking to a number of people about the movie. But we finally had our full one shot on it, and I was joined by Alicia, Jean, and our good friend Ron Dawson. Was able to make it in and sit in. We have a really good time with that. I've got a couple of special projects in the works. Star Trek The Motion Picture. It's the 45th anniversary for that.
Looking forward to that.
Yes, and you're going to join as well as I believe Jean, and I think Ron is on that one as well. And I think
we got to have one OG voice there. Right?
Yes, and I'm going to be doing a special pod. So we're going to do a Lorehounds kind of conversation, and then I'm going to do a crossover podcast with a podcast called The Captain's Pod.
Right.
And Ian and I are going to do kind of a broader meta conversation about Star Trek and how the 1979 movie, how it rebooted the franchise, and all of that meant. The other project I'm working on, which I'm just starting to work on now, it's the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm trying to figure out how we're going to apply some coverage to that. For subscribers, we just had our second breakfast podcast. We covered bagels. Alicia and I, John, you had couldn't join us for that,
sick
but
baby.
Alicia, baby. We had a lot of fun talking about bagels. And then last month for 11Z's, our movie club for subscribers, we did V for Vendetta, and boy, did we go deep on that. It was supposed to be like an hour-long pod, and it was like 2 hours.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. We got to cut Alicia off at some point. I mean, come on.
And then,
do we need like a podcast intervention for
her? We might. Or we need to go like Celebrimbor with her and just provide her with all of the necessities of life.
Redouble her efforts.
Podcast forever.
Give her
she can
a bag
be
on
plugged into the Matrix, just podcasts, waving off of her. But tomorrow she's
This is the Ringer's hammer. Forge your podcast with it.
I love it.
No, you know what's a better analogy? This is Joe Rogan's hammer.
We have the movie Prey, and we're going to be covering that tomorrow morning, John. So we should be getting to bed here very soon.
Yeah, I still have to finish watching the movie.
And then Alicia, speaking of Alicia again, Wolshift Dust Book Club, the second part of the Dust book breakdown, which is the last part of the reading the book project, is going to be coming out in the Silo trilogy. And then Marilyn, you and her recorded a podcast, part 2 of a podcast, Canon Folklore of the Old Republic, discussions with Marilyn. You guys talk about Sith and werewolves?
Yeah, imagine that.
And that's on the Star Wars canon timeline podcast. How does Alicia do all of this? Is she a multi-dimensional being to spend as much time? How does she keep all of this in her brain?
Sleep.
Is her brain like the TARDIS to like store all this information?
Could be.
Something like that.
She knows a lot of IPs.
She only recently ever rejected my request on, does she want to be on this project I'm working on with me? And and I was like,
good.
You know what? I support that. I support you having boundaries, Alicia. If you're listening to 2 hours and 10 minutes into this podcast, Alicia, I support you having boundaries.
Good job saying no. It's hard, but you practice it often enough and you can do it.
All right, that's plenty. There's more, but that's plenty.
Yeah. That's why I limit it, David. I limit it to the week coming. That's my new thing.
It's so hard. We have
you're going. The 50th anniversary of D&D. I'm like, that's like 7 podcasts from now. Just leave it off. Leave it off.
I want to get hype. I want the hype.
I know. But now they're all gone. So let's do our quick thank yous here.
Why don't you do it?
Okay, I don't have music loaded up.
That's fine.
It's a sleepy night. Let's do our sleepy thank yous. Gnarls, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve 71, Captain Gingy 56, Athena A, Adrian, sorry, Tina, Lestu, Nancy M, and Ghost of Partition. Those are our Discord server boosters. They boost the Discord server so we have special features, and thank you very much to them. Then our Patreon and Supercast lore masters, our top tier subscribers. We always like to give a thank you to them. They are Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve 71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Garrett C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Deli V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Lestu, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, Fossey U, Neil F, Ben B, Charlotte M, and Adrian. Thank you, everyone. It's been a long week and a long night, but I think we had a good conversation tonight, and we look forward to seeing our Patreon Supercast subscribers on the Lorecast.
Yes.
See you then. The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by the Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.